The most dangerous secrets are never hidden in dark alleys. They are hidden behind perfect smiles and flawless makeup. The fluorescent lights above the employee locker room buzzed with a tired hum, washing everything in a pale blue glow that made even healthy skin look exhausted. Hannah Cooper stood in front of the narrow mirror, her fingers steady only because she had practiced this ritual so many times. A small tube of concealer rested beside a worn makeup brush. Outside the door, dishes clattered, voices echoed through the hallway, and another busy Friday night was already beginning at Rossini's, one of Chicago's most expensive Italian restaurants. Inside the mirror, however, there was only years old, nursing student, waitress, and someone who had become far too skilled at hiding things. She leaned closer to the glass. The makeup blended carefully against the faint discoloration near her cheekbone. Not enough to attract attention if someone glanced at her under the restaurant's golden lighting. Not enough for questions. Questions were dangerous. Questions led to conversations. Conversations led to truths she wasn't ready to say out loud. The brush moved slowly, deliberately. By the time she stepped back, the reflection staring at her looked normal again, at least normal enough. Her phone vibrated inside her apron pocket. A message appeared on the screen, "Tyler, have a good shift, don't stay late." Hannah stared at the text longer than necessary. Most people would have read concern. She read instructions, a reminder, a leash disguised as affection. She slipped the phone away before anyone could notice the way her expression changed. 5 minutes, Cooper?" A manager called from the hallway. "Coming," she answered. Her voice sounded perfectly calm, it always did. The dining room looked like a scene from another world. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm amber light across polished marble floors. Expensive wine bottles lined glass walls. Men in tailored suits discussed investments while couples celebrated anniversaries beside flickering candles. Everything shimmered. Everything looked untouchable. Hannah moved between tables carrying trays, balanced effortlessly, made it look easy. Smile, pour, step away, repeat. By 7:30, every table in the restaurant was occupied. The kitchen roared behind swinging doors. The scent of garlic, basil, and fresh bread drifted through the room. For a little while the noise helped. Noise made it easier not to think. Then the front entrance opened. The atmosphere changed immediately. It was subtle. No announcement, no dramatic entrance. Just a shift. Conversations lowered. Several employees straightened instinctively. Even guests glanced toward the doorway. Hannah followed their attention. A tall man entered, surrounded by quiet confidence rather than security. Dark tailored suit, black tie, broad shoulders, the kind of presence that seemed to alter the room without effort. Sebastian Romano. Hannah recognized the name instantly. Everybody in Chicago knew it. Rumors followed him everywhere. Businessman, investor, philanthropist. Other rumors were darker. Nobody ever seemed willing to repeat those loudly. He crossed the room with measured steps and took a seat in the private VIP section. The manager hurried over personally. That alone said enough. Hannah tried not to stare. Wealthy clients came and went every week. This should have been no different. Yet something about him felt different, not louder, not more intimidating, more observant. Like someone who noticed details other people ignored. "Table 12 is yours," the manager whispered. "Make sure everything is perfect." Hannah nodded. A familiar knot tightened in her stomach. She picked up a water pitcher and approached. Sebastian sat alone, reviewing something on his phone. Warm light from a nearby chandelier cast sharp shadows across his face. He looked up as she arrived, only for a second. "Good evening," Hannah said professionally. "Can I start you with sparkling or still water?" "Still," he replied. His voice was calm, controlled. She poured carefully. The silence stretched slightly longer than expected. Then she felt it. His attention, not inappropriate, not invasive, simply focused, like he was studying a puzzle. Hannah lowered the pitcher. "Are you ready to order?" "Not yet." Another pause. "Long day?" The question seemed harmless. She offered the same polite smile she gave every customer. "Aren't they all?" A faint hint of amusement touched his expression, some more than others. Hannah turned to leave. The interaction should have ended there. It almost did. But as she shifted the tray against her hip, the sleeve of her uniform slipped back half an inch. Barely noticeable, barely visible. Yet Sebastian's eyes moved instantly to her wrist. Just for a moment, one brief glance, then back to her face. Hannah felt cold. Not because he had seen anything obvious, because he had seen enough. The sleeve dropped back into place. The music continued. Glasses clinked. Conversations resumed around them. Yet the air between them felt strangely still. Sebastian set his phone down slowly. His expression never changed. "Miss Cooper," he said. Hannah froze. She had never introduced herself. "Who did that to you?" Hannah felt the air leave her lungs. The noise of the restaurant continued around her, but Sebastian Romano's question seemed to silence everything else. For a second she simply stared at him, the warm glow of the chandelier reflected against crystal glasses between them, while distant laughter drifted through the dining room. Nobody else appeared to notice the conversation unfolding at table 12. Nobody else seemed aware that one carefully chosen sentence had just cracked through months of carefully constructed walls. "I do not know what you mean," she said quietly. The answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. Sebastian leaned back slightly in his chair. His expression remained calm, unreadable. He did not challenge her, he did not press. Somehow that made it worse. "Of course," he said. "My mistake." Hannah nodded once and stepped away before he could say anything else. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she crossed the dining room. The tray suddenly felt heavier in her hands. She moved through her next few tables automatically, smiling when required, refilling drinks, writing orders. Yet her thoughts kept returning to the same moment, the glance toward her wrist, the question, the certainty in his voice. He had known immediately, not guessed, known. That realization unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Most people never noticed. Most people saw what they expected to see. A hard-working waitress, a nursing student trying to survive tuition payments, a young woman who smiled enough to appear fine. Sebastian Romano had looked for less than 5 seconds. Somehow that had been enough. An hour passed. The dinner rush reached its peak. The kitchen became a blur of motion and noise. Hannah focused on work because work was predictable. Predictable things felt safe. Unfortunately, life rarely stayed predictable for long. Her phone vibrated again. "Tyler, what time are you leaving?" She stared at the message. 30 seconds later, another appeared. "Tyler, I asked you a question." Hannah typed a response. "Busy. Probably around 11. The typing indicator appeared instantly, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, another message arrived. "Tyler, I will pick you up." Hannah slipped the phone back into her apron. A familiar knot tightened in her stomach. Across the restaurant, Sebastian remained seated at table 12. Several men had joined him during the evening, expensive suits, quiet conversations, business discussions perhaps. Hannah could not hear them, she did not want to. Yet every time she approached the table, she felt his attention shift toward her, not constantly, not enough to be inappropriate, just enough to make her aware. Shortly after 10 o'clock, one of the other waitresses approached. "Your VIP left this for you." Hannah looked down. A folded white card rested in the woman's hand. "What is it?" "No idea. It was from table 12. Hannah hesitated before opening it. Inside, only a few words appeared in clean handwriting. "If you ever need help, ask." No signature, no phone number, nothing else. She looked toward the VIP section. The table was empty. Sebastian Romano had already left. For reasons she could not explain, disappointment flickered through her before she quickly pushed it away. The shift finally ended at 11:15. Employees filtered toward the locker room while managers counted receipts. Outside, rain tapped softly against the restaurant's front windows. Chicago's skyline glowed through the darkness like scattered gold floating above black water. Hannah changed clothes and stepped into the parking garage beneath the building. The concrete structure echoed with distant engines and dripping water. Her sneakers clicked against the floor as she walked toward her aging Honda Civic. Halfway there, headlights flashed. A black SUV rolled slowly into view and stopped near the entrance ramp. Her heart skipped once, then the driver's door opened. Relief arrived immediately when Tyler stepped out. Relief quickly gave way to something else, something harder to name. Tyler approached with a smile that looked perfect from a distance. Handsome, well-dressed, successful, the version of himself everyone else saw. "There you are," he said. "I was worried." Hannah forced a small smile. "My shift ran late. I noticed." The words sounded harmless, yet something about them felt heavier than they should have. Tyler glanced toward the restaurant entrance. "Interesting crowd tonight." Hannah followed his gaze. The black SUV remained parked near the ramp, empty now, or so it appeared. "What do you mean?" she asked. Tyler shrugged casually. "Nothing, just noticed some important people coming and going." Rain continued to fall beyond the garage opening. Somewhere above them, thunder rolled across the city. Tyler stepped closer and adjusted the collar of her jacket with gentle precision. To anyone watching, it would have looked affectionate, caring. Hannah remained perfectly still. "You should be more careful," he said softly. "People notice things." A chill moved down her spine. Then Tyler smiled again. "Come on, let us go home." Unfortunately for Hannah, neither of them noticed the figure standing inside the shadowed second level of the garage. Less than 50 yards away, Sebastian Romano watched the interaction in complete silence, and for the first time that evening his expression turned cold. Rain followed them all the way across the city. Tiny droplets streaked across the windshield as Tyler drove through downtown Chicago, the rhythmic sweep of the wipers filling the silence between them. Streetlights blurred into long ribbons of gold and white against the wet pavement. Hannah sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the city slide past the glass. Tyler seemed relaxed, almost cheerful. That alone made her uneasy. He hummed softly along with a song playing on the radio. Every few minutes he glanced toward her with the same pleasant smile he showed everyone else. The smile that convinced people he was thoughtful, dependable, kind. "You seem tired," he said finally. "Long shift." Hannah nodded. "It was busy, I bet." His fingers tapped lightly against the steering wheel. "Meet anyone interesting tonight?" The question sounded casual, too casual. Hannah looked out the window. "Just customers. Nobody special?" The traffic light ahead turned red. The SUV rolled to a stop. Reflections from nearby storefronts shimmered across the dashboard. Hannah felt the familiar pressure building beneath the conversation. Not an argument, not exactly. Something quieter, more difficult to explain, like walking across ice that might crack at any moment. "Just customers," she repeated. Tyler smiled again. "Good." The light changed. They continued driving. Neither spoke for several blocks. When they finally reached the apartment complex, midnight was approaching. The parking lot sat nearly empty beneath rows of dim security lights. Rainwater pooled along the curbs. Tyler parked and turned off the engine. Silence settled instantly. "I have a meeting tomorrow," he said. "You should stay home after class." Hannah looked at him. "Why?" "Because it is safer." "Safer from what?" For the first time something flickered behind his smile. It vanished almost immediately. "You worry too much." He stepped out before she could ask another question. 20 minutes later, Hannah sat alone inside the apartment. The television played quietly in the background. She barely noticed it. Her nursing textbooks remained open on the coffee table, untouched. Instead, she found herself staring at the folded white card from Sebastian Romano. "If you ever need help, ask." She had read those words at least a dozen times since leaving work. They should not have mattered. They should have been easy to ignore. Yet something about them lingered, maybe because nobody had asked if she needed help in a very long time. Her phone buzzed suddenly. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. Hannah hesitated before answering. "Hello?" Silence. Then the call disconnected. She frowned. A few seconds later, another notification appeared. "Unknown number. Be careful who you trust." Hannah stared at the message. Her pulse quickened. Before she could respond, the sender vanished. No name, no explanation, nothing. The apartment suddenly felt colder. Less than 3 miles away, another light remained on long after midnight. Sebastian Romano stood inside the top floor office of a restored warehouse overlooking the Chicago River. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline beyond. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Across his desk lay a small collection of photographs, security footage from the restaurant garage, images of Tyler Brooks, vehicle records, employment history, financial reports. Sebastian studied them in silence. A man entered the office carrying a tablet. "Everything checks out," he said. "Tyler Brooks, 31 years old, works for Brooks Community Development." Sebastian continued looking at the photographs. "Family?" "His father runs the Brooks Foundation." The man paused. "Large charity organization, powerful connections." Sebastian finally looked up. "Anything unusual? Nothing obvious." The answer sounded incomplete. Sebastian noticed immediately. "And?" The man exhaled. "A few financial inconsistencies. Small ones, nothing we can prove." Sebastian returned his attention to the photographs. One image showed Hannah leaving the restaurant. Another showed Tyler waiting in the garage. Another captured the moment Tyler adjusted her jacket collar while she stood perfectly still. Most people would have seen nothing. Sebastian saw enough. "Keep looking," he said quietly. Back at the apartment, sleep refused to come. Hannah eventually moved toward the kitchen for a glass of water. As she passed the front door, something caught her attention. A shadow moved beneath the frosted glass panel. She froze instantly. The movement disappeared. Hannah waited. Listenings. Her heartbeat seemed louder than the apartment itself. Slowly she approached the door. Another shadow crossed the glass. Someone was standing outside, not knocking, not speaking, just standing there. Hannah's hand tightened around the edge of the counter. Seconds passed, then a minute. Finally, she gathered enough courage to look through the peephole. The hallway beyond was empty, completely empty. Whoever had been there was gone. But taped neatly to the center of her door was a plain white envelope she had never seen before. Hannah stared at the envelope for several long seconds before unlocking the door. The hallway beyond remained empty. Soft yellow light spilled from ceiling fixtures onto worn carpet, revealing nothing except silence. Whoever had left the envelope was gone. She stepped into the hallway, looked both directions, then quickly grabbed it and returned inside. The deadbolt clicked into place behind her. For a moment she simply stood there holding the plain white envelope beneath the kitchen light. No stamp, no address, no name, just a folded piece of paper hidden inside. Her fingers hesitated before opening it. The note contained only a single sentence. "You already have something they want." Hannah read the words twice. Then a third time her heartbeat quickened. The message made no sense. She checked the envelope again. Nothing else. No explanation. No clue about who had sent it. Across the room, the television continued playing to an empty audience. A late-night weather forecast flashed across the screen while rain continued falling outside. Hannah lowered herself onto the couch and stared at the note. "Something they want." The words echoed in her mind. She owned almost nothing of value. Student loans, textbooks, an aging car, a tiny apartment she could barely afford. There was nothing anyone could possibly want from her, yet the uneasy feeling remained. Eventually exhaustion won. Sometime after 2 in the morning she drifted into restless sleep. The next day arrived beneath grey skies and cold wind sweeping off Lake Michigan. Hannah attended classes at nursing school while fighting exhaustion. The note remained folded inside her bag. Every break between lectures she found herself checking it again, as if the words might somehow change. They never did. By afternoon she convinced herself it had been a prank, an accident, a misunderstanding. Unfortunately, that explanation lasted less than 10 minutes. When class ended, she walked toward the student parking lot, carrying a stack of textbooks against her chest. Halfway across the lot she noticed a black sedan parked near the exit. The vehicle looked ordinary, yet something felt familiar about it. As Hannah approached her car, the sedan slowly pulled away. She frowned but dismissed it. Then she drove toward a coffee shop near campus. 20 minutes later, the same sedan appeared again across the street. A coincidence, she told herself. Nothing more. Yet when she left the coffee shop and headed toward work, she noticed the sedan in her rearview mirror once again. Not close enough to attract attention, not obvious enough to prove anything. Just present. By the time Hannah arrived at Rossini's, her nerves felt stretched tight. The restaurant was quieter than usual. A private event occupied the upper ballroom, leaving the main dining area unusually calm. She tied her apron, checked her appearance in the employee mirror, and tried to focus on work. "It lasted all of 12 minutes, Miss Cooper." Hannah turned. One of the hostesses stood beside her, holding a small black gift box. "This was delivered for you." Hannah stared at it. "For me? That is what they said." The hostess handed it over and walked away. Hannah opened it carefully. Inside sat a silver key attached to a simple metal tag. No brand, no logo, just a number. 314. Beneath the key rested another folded note. Storage Unit 314. North Harbor Storage. Come alone. Hannah's stomach tightened. The handwriting matched the message from the night before. She looked around the restaurant instinctively. Nobody seemed interested in her. Nobody appeared to be watching. Yet the feeling returned immediately. The same sensation she had experienced in the parking lot. The uncomfortable awareness that unseen eyes followed her movements. Less than a mile away, Sebastian Romano sat inside a quiet office overlooking the river. A digital map glowed across multiple monitors. One of his men entered carrying a folder. "We found something." Sebastian looked up. "Tell me." The folder landed on the desk. Financial reports, foundation records, corporate filings. Tyler Brooks has been making unusual visits to a storage facility on the north side for nearly 6 months. Sebastian's eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of storage facility?" "North Harbor Storage." Silence settled over the room. Sebastian slowly opened the folder. Unfortunately for Hannah, at that exact moment she was reading the same location written on the note in her hands, and neither of them knew that before sunset, Storage Unit 314 would reveal the first piece of a mystery much larger than either expected. The remainder of Hannah's shift passed in a blur of distracted smiles and unfinished thoughts. Every spare second her eyes drifted back toward the small silver key hidden inside her apron pocket. Storage Unit 314. The words seemed heavier with every passing hour. By the time Rossini's finally closed for the night, the city beyond the restaurant windows had transformed into a landscape of reflected neon and rain-soaked pavement. Most employees headed home immediately. Hannah lingered in the locker room, staring at her reflection beneath the familiar fluorescent lights. The bruises were hidden, the smile looked convincing, yet the woman in the mirror appeared more exhausted than ever. She pulled the key from her pocket and studied it one last time. Common sense told her to throw it away, to forget the messages, forget the growing feeling that something strange was unfolding around her. Instead, 30 minutes later, she found herself driving north through the city. The roads were mostly empty. Wind pushed against her Honda as she crossed an industrial section of Chicago lined with warehouses and shipping yards. North Harbor Storage appeared just after midnight. The facility sat behind a chain-link fence illuminated by rows of security lights. Hundreds of storage units stretched silent grey boxes. Hannah parked near the entrance and sat motionless behind the steering wheel. Her heartbeat echoed inside the quiet car. She almost turned around. Then she remembered the note. "You already have something they want." The memory pushed her forward. A keypad protected the front gate. Before she could figure out what to do, the gate slowly rolled open. Hannah frowned. No employee appeared. No voice spoke through an intercom. The gate simply opened, as if someone had expected her. The feeling should have sent her back to the car. Instead, curiosity carried her inside. Unit 314 stood near the far end of the property. Rainwater dripped from metal roofs overhead. The wind carried distant sounds from the harbor. Everything else remained silent. Hannah stopped in front of the unit and stared at the lock. Her hand trembled slightly as she inserted the key. The lock clicked open immediately. For several seconds, she did nothing. Then she lifted the metal door. It rattled upward with a harsh metallic sound that echoed through the darkness. The storage unit was surprisingly small. A single folding chair sat against one wall. Cardboard boxes occupied the corners. Dust covered most surfaces. Nothing looked valuable, nothing looked important. Hannah stepped inside. Her phone flashlight swept across the room. One box contained old financial paperwork. Another contained outdated office supplies. She almost laughed at herself. Maybe this really was a mistake. Then her light landed on a small black case resting beneath the chair. Hannah knelt and opened it. Inside sat a flash drive. No label, no markings, just a simple black USB device. Her stomach tightened instantly. This was what someone wanted her to find. The question was why. Suddenly, headlights flashed through the narrow gap beneath the storage door. Hannah froze. An engine approached somewhere nearby. Fear surged through her chest. She quickly placed the flash drive into her purse and lowered the storage door. Outside, tires rolled slowly across wet pavement. Another vehicle had entered the facility. Hannah remained perfectly still. The footsteps never came. After several tense moments, the vehicle moved away again. Only then did she finally exhale. Less than 15 minutes later, she was back inside her apartment. The flash drive sat on the coffee table beneath a single lamp. Rain tapped softly against the windows while midnight slipped toward 1 in the morning. Hannah stared at the device. Every instinct warned her not to continue, yet another part of her needed answers. She opened her laptop. The flash drive connected instantly. A folder appeared on the screen. Hundreds of files filled the directory: spreadsheets, financial reports, payment records. Hannah blinked in meaningless. Rows of numbers, dates, transactions. Then one name appeared repeatedly throughout the files: Brooks Foundation. Hannah sat up straighter. She knew that name. Tyler had mentioned it countless times. His father's charity organization. She clicked another file. More financial records. The numbers seemed enormous. Hundreds of thousands of dollars moving between accounts she did not recognize. Unfortunately for Hannah, she never noticed the black SUV parked across the street from her apartment building. Inside the vehicle, a man lowered a pair of binoculars and reached for his phone. At that exact moment, someone else had realized the flash drive was no longer storage unit 314. The glow from Hannah's laptop painted pale blue shadows across her apartment walls as the clock crept past 1:30 in the morning. Outside, Chicago remained wrapped in rain and silence. Inside, rows of financial records filled her screen. Most of the spreadsheets meant little to her. She was a nursing student, not an accountant, yet certain details stood out immediately. The same account numbers appeared repeatedly. Large transfers moved through multiple organizations before disappearing into unfamiliar companies. Several transactions were marked as community grants. Others were labeled emergency assistance funds. The numbers were staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes more. Hannah clicked through file after file. The deeper she searched, the stranger everything became. Then she found a folder labeled Donner Reports. Her eyes narrowed. One document opened automatically. At the top of the page appeared a familiar name, Richard Brooks, chairman, Brooks Foundation. Hannah sat back in her chair. Tyler's father, the respected businessman, appeared regularly on local news programs, community events, charity galas, fundraisers. The man practically represented generosity in Chicago, yet the documents beneath his name raised uncomfortable questions. Another file contained scanned signatures, another showed payment authorizations, another listed private meetings that never appeared in official reports. Something rubbed her tired eyes. About all of this felt wrong, not criminal, not yet, just wrong. Her phone suddenly vibrated on the table. The sharp sound nearly made her jump. Tyler's name appeared on the screen. 2 o'clock in the morning. Hannah hesitated before answering. "Hello, you are awake." Tyler sounded calm. Too calm. "I was studying. At 2 in the morning?" Hannah glanced toward the laptop. "Exams are coming." Silence lingered for a moment. Then Tyler spoke again. "You sound nervous." "I am tired." Another pause followed. "You are at home?" The question felt simple. Yet something inside Hannah tightened immediately. "Yes, good." His voice softened. "Get some sleep." The call ended before she could respond. Hannah stared at the screen. Her pulse remained elevated long after the conversation ended. Something had changed. She could feel it. The strange notes, the storage unit, the flash drive, the anonymous messages. Pieces of a puzzle were beginning to form a shape she could not yet understand. Across the city, another late-night conversation was taking place. Sebastian Romano stood beside a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the river. City lights reflected against dark water below. A tablet rested in his hand. One of his security specialists spoke through an encrypted call. The storage unit was accessed. Sebastian's expression remained unreadable. "By who?" "Hannah Cooper." The answer brought no surprise. "Anyone else?" "Not directly." A brief pause followed, but someone monitored the location afterward. Sebastian turned slightly toward the glass. "Tyler? Possibly. We cannot confirm it yet." Silence settled between them. Finally, Sebastian spoke. "Keep watching. You think she found something important?" Sebastian's eyes drifted toward the city skyline. "Someone certainly thinks she did." Back at the apartment, sleep eventually won the battle against exhaustion. Hannah closed the laptop and collapsed onto the couch. The flash drive remained connected to her computer. The files remained open. She planned to review everything again in the morning. Unfortunately, morning arrived with another surprise. At 8:15, a loud knock echoed through her apartment. Anna woke instantly. Sunlight filtered through the curtains. Her neck ached from sleeping awkwardly on the couch. The knock came again. She crossed the room cautiously and checked the peephole. A delivery driver stood outside holding a large white envelope. Minutes later, she carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen counter. Her name appeared on the front in neat black lettering. No return address, no company logo, nothing. Hannah opened it carefully. Inside sat a single invitation printed on expensive cream-colored cardstock. Brooks Foundation Annual Charity Gala. Saturday evening, Grand Harbor Hotel. Special guest invitation. Hannah stared at the card in disbelief. She had never attended a gala in her life. The invitation should not have existed. Then she noticed the handwritten message across the bottom. "If you want answers, come." No signature, no explanation, just those 5 words. Hannah looked toward her laptop, then toward the invitation. Then back toward the laptop again. She still believed the mystery revolved around Tyler and his family. She had no idea that by attending the gala, she would soon come face to face with the man who already knew far more about her situation than she realized. Saturday evening arrived wrapped in cold wind and silver clouds drifting above downtown Chicago. The Grand Harbor Hotel rose beside the river like a palace of glass and light, its towering windows reflecting the city skyline in golden fragments. Hannah stood across the street for nearly a full minute before crossing toward the entrance. The invitation felt heavy inside her purse. So did the flash drive. Every instinct told her to turn around. Instead, she stepped through revolving doors and entered a world that looked completely different from her own. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. A string quartet played softly near a marble staircase. Men in tailored tuxedos and women in elegant gowns moved through the ballroom carrying champagne glasses and discussing charitable initiatives. Everywhere Hannah looked, wealth and influence filled the room. The Brooks Foundation logo appeared on banners throughout the event. Photographs showcased smiling families, community projects, and scholarship recipients. At the center of it all stood Richard Brooks, confident, charismatic, admired. Guests lined up to shake his hand. Cameras flashed constantly. It was difficult to connect the respected philanthropist with the strange files hidden inside her apartment. Hannah moved carefully through the crowd. She had no idea who invited her or why. She only knew someone wanted her here. Less than 30 feet away, another guest watched her arrival. Sebastian Romano stood near a balcony overlooking the ballroom. Black tuxedo, calm expression, observant eyes. He noticed immediately how tense she looked. How often she checked exits, how her hand remained close to her purse. Hannah spotted him moments later. Their eyes met across the room. Something about his presence felt unexpectedly grounding, familiar. Before she could decide whether to approach him, a voice interrupted from behind. "Hannah." She turned sharply. Tyler stood there smiling. The sight of him instantly tightened every muscle in her body. "You came," he said. "I was surprised. I received an invitation." Tyler's smile faded slightly. "Who sent it?" "I was hoping you could tell me." For the briefest moment, uncertainty crossed his face. Then it vanished. "Come on, my father would love to meet you properly." Hannah followed reluctantly. Richard Brooks greeted her with polished warmth. His handshake was gentle, his voice calm. Everything about him matched the public image displayed throughout the ballroom. Yet something felt wrong. The same feeling she experienced while reading the files. The same feeling that refused to disappear. "Tyler speaks highly of you," Richard said. "Future nurse. Hard worker. We need more people like that." Hannah thanked him politely. Then she noticed something beside the stage. A large digital display cycled through donation reports and foundation achievements. One slide briefly showed financial figures. Most guests ignored it completely. Hannah did not. Several account numbers looked familiar, very familiar. Her pulse quickened. She had seen them before, on the flash drive. Suddenly the ballroom noise seemed distant. Hannah excused herself and moved toward a quieter hallway. Her breathing grew shallow. She pulled out her phone and opened photographs she had taken from the files. One by one she compared the numbers. The match was exact, not similar, exact. The same accounts appeared in official donation reports and in hidden transaction records. Footsteps approached behind her. Hannah turned. Sebastian stood at the far end of the hallway. "You look like you finally found something," he said quietly. Hannah hesitated. Every warning in her mind urged caution, yet for reasons she could not fully explain, she trusted him more than anyone else in the building. "I think I did." Sebastian studied her expression. "Tell me." Hannah looked toward the ballroom entrance to make sure nobody was listening. Then she lowered her voice. "The files from the storage unit, they are connected to the foundation." Sebastian remained silent. "I thought Tyler was hiding something personal." "But it is bigger than that." She opened one photograph and handed him the phone. Sebastian examined the screen. His expression darkened immediately. Not with surprise, with confirmation. As if he had been searching for the missing piece of a puzzle and had finally found it. Hannah noticed the reaction instantly. "You already knew something was wrong." Sebastian looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I knew enough to keep looking." The realization hit her like cold water. The storage unit, the notes, the flash drive, Tyler's fear, Richard's foundation. Suddenly everything aligned into a terrifying possibility. The money was never the mystery. The money was the evidence. And someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide it. Unfortunately for Hannah, at that exact moment another person in the ballroom realized she had connected the pieces together. The hallway suddenly felt much narrower than before. Music from the ballroom drifted through the open doorway behind Hannah, but the elegant atmosphere no longer comforted her. Every smiling guest now seemed connected to something she did not fully understand. She looked from the phone in her hand to Sebastian's face. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. Sebastian glanced toward the ballroom before answering. "Long enough to know that someone has been moving money through organizations that should have been helping people." Hannah folded her arms across herself. "And Tyler is involved." "Yes." The answer came without hesitation, but he is not the one making the decisions. Hannah already knew who Sebastian meant. Richard Brooks, the respected businessman standing beneath crystal chandeliers shaking hands with donors. The man whose photographs covered the walls of the event. The man everyone admired. The realization left a hollow feeling in her chest. "Why would someone send me the flash drive?" she asked. Sebastian studied her expression carefully. "That is the question that matters." Before Hannah could respond, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Both turned simultaneously. Tyler appeared near the entrance, his smile polite but strained. "There you are," he said. His eyes moved briefly toward Sebastian before returning to Hannah. "I have been looking everywhere for you." Hannah noticed something different immediately. The confidence he usually carried seemed thinner tonight, less natural. "I needed some air," she replied. Tyler nodded. "My father wants to introduce you to a few board members." His attention shifted towards Sebastian. "Mr. Romano." Sebastian's expression remained perfectly calm. "Mr. Brooks." The exchange lasted only seconds, yet the tension between them felt unmistakable. Tyler placed a hand lightly against Hannah's elbow. "Come on." Hannah hesitated. For reasons she could not explain, she suddenly did not want to leave the hallway. Not yet, not with so many unanswered questions. Yet refusing would only attract attention. She followed Tyler back into the ballroom. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, laughter echoed beneath the chandeliers. Everything looked beautiful, everything felt false. Throughout the next hour, Hannah remained beside Tyler as he introduced her to donors, executives, and foundation supporters. Most conversations blurred together. She nodded politely, smiled when necessary, listened carefully. The more she observed, the more patterns emerged. Several names from the flash drive appeared repeatedly throughout the evening. Certain donors received unusual attention from Richard Brooks. Certain conversations stopped whenever unfamiliar people approached. Small details, nothing obvious. Yet together they painted an increasingly troubling picture. Near 9 o'clock, the ballroom lights dimmed slightly as Richard stepped onto the stage. Applause filled the room. He thanked supporters, praised volunteers, and spoke passionately about helping underserved communities. The audience loved every word. Hannah watched from near the back of the room. Then something caught her attention. A woman standing alone beside one of the service entrances. Mid-40s, dark coat, nervous posture. Unlike everyone else in attendance, she looked uncomfortable being there. Their eyes met briefly. The woman immediately looked away. A few moments later, she slipped through a side door. Hannah frowned. Something about the encounter felt deliberate. Without fully understanding why, she followed. The hallway beyond the ballroom was quieter. Service corridors stretched through the hotel behind the public areas. Hannah turned a corner and spotted the woman waiting near an emergency exit. "You came," the stranger said softly. Hannah stopped several feet away. "Do I know you?" The woman shook her head. "No, but I know why you received the flash drive." Hannah's heart began to race. "Who are you?" The woman glanced nervously over her shoulder. "Someone who used to work for the foundation." Hannah took another step forward. "Then tell me what is happening." The woman exhaled slowly. The money in those files was supposed to fund shelters, clinics, and scholarship programs. Instead, it disappeared. Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. Hearing the truth spoken aloud made everything more dangerous. "Why send it to me?" The woman's eyes filled with something that looked almost like regret. "Because you already had a connection to someone involved." Before Hannah could ask another question, the woman's attention shifted toward the far end of the corridor. Fear flashed across her face. "I have to go. Wait. You need to trust Sebastian Romano." Hannah froze. "Why?" The woman backed toward the exit door. "Because he is the only reason I am still alive." Then she disappeared into the night, leaving Hannah alone in the corridor with more questions than answers and one terrifying realization. Somewhere inside the ballroom, someone had just noticed that the former foundation employee was no longer where she was supposed to be. The service corridor felt colder after the woman disappeared. Hannah stood motionless beside the emergency exit, staring at the door long after it closed. The sounds of the gala seemed distant now, muffled by concrete walls and unanswered questions. "Trust Sebastian Romano." The words repeated in her mind. She barely knew him, yet every warning she had received somehow pointed back to him. Before she could decide what to do next, footsteps approached from the far end of the hallway. Hannah turned quickly. Sebastian appeared first. Relief arrived before she could stop it. He noticed immediately. "You are all right," he said. It was not quite a question. "I met someone," Hannah replied. A woman, connected expression sharpened. "What did she say?" Hannah explained everything. The storage files, the missing money, the warning, the strange instruction to trust him. When she finished, silence settled between them. "Do you know who she is?" Hannah asked. Sebastian nodded green. "She worked in financial compliance for the foundation 3 years ago. Then she is real, very real." Hannah folded her arms. Why would she disappear like that? Sebastian glanced toward the ballroom entrance. "Because people who ask questions tend to become uncomfortable problems." Hannah felt a chill despite the warmth of the hotel. "And now I am asking questions." "Yes." For a moment neither spoke. The truth hung between them like a storm cloud. Then Sebastian looked directly at her. "You should leave the gala." Hannah frowned. That sounds like an order. It is advice. There is a difference. A faint smile appeared for the first time that evening. Unexpectedly, Hannah smiled back. The tension eased slightly, not completely, just enough to breathe. I am tired of being told where to go, she said. And I am tired of not knowing what is happening. Sebastian studied her for several seconds. Then he reached inside his jacket and removed a folded piece of paper. You wanted answers. Hannah accepted it carefully. An address was written across the page. A roadside motel nearly 60 miles outside Chicago. What is this? Where Valerie has been hiding. Hannah looked up sharply. You know where she is? I know where she was this morning. Then why are we standing here? The question surprised even her. Sebastian's expression remained calm, but something changed in his eyes. Recognition. He had expected fear. Instead he found determination. Because once you go looking for the truth, he said quietly, there is no pretending you never found it. Less than 2 hours later, they were driving west beneath a sky filled with drifting clouds and distant stars. Chicago faded behind them in a sea of lights. Hannah sat in the passenger seat of a black SUV while highway signs flashed past outside the windows. The situation felt surreal. 3 weeks ago, her life consisted of nursing classes, restaurant shifts, and trying to survive one difficult day at a time. Now she was chasing hidden witnesses through the middle of the night with one of the most powerful men in the city. You are unusually calm, Sebastian observed. Hannah laughed softly. That is because I passed nervous about 50 miles ago. The answer earned another faint smile. Silence returned afterward, but it felt different than before, easier, more comfortable. For the first time in months, Hannah felt something she had almost forgotten, safe. Not because her problems were solved, not because the mystery was over, simply because someone finally believed her. Unfortunately for both of them, they were not the only people traveling that night. Nearly half a mile behind them, another vehicle remained hidden among highway traffic. Its headlights stayed distant. Its driver never attempted to pass, yet it followed every turn, every exit, every mile. Shortly after midnight appeared beside a deserted stretch of road lined with dark trees. Neon lights flickered above the office. Only a handful of rooms appeared occupied. Hannah stepped out of the SUV and looked around uneasily. Wind rustled through nearby branches. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed across darkness. Sebastian approached the front office first. A few minutes later, he returned. His expression had changed. What happened? Hannah asked immediately. Sebastian looked toward the second-floor balcony overlooking the parking lot. One room stood open, empty. We missed her, he said. Hannah's stomach sank. Are you sure? Sebastian nodded once. Then he handed her something the motel manager had found inside Valerie Green's room. Hannah unfolded the paper. A single sentence had been written in hurried handwriting. If you found this, Richard knows everything. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Hannah read the message again beneath the flickering neon glow outside the motel office. If you found this, Richard knows everything. Wind swept across the nearly empty parking lot, carrying the distant sound of traffic from the highway. The second-floor motel room remained open behind them. A half-empty coffee cup sat on a small table near the window. Valerie Green had been here recently, very recently, yet she was gone. Hannah lowered the note slowly. What does that mean? She asked. Sebastian looked toward the dark tree line beyond the motel. It means she knew someone was looking for her. Richard? Possibly. The uncertainty in his voice unsettled her more than a direct answer would have. They entered the room together. Nothing appeared damaged, nothing looked disturbed. It felt less like someone had fled and more like someone had left in a hurry. Hannah moved carefully through the small space. A notebook lay on the dresser beside the bed. Most of its pages had been torn out. A few remained, grocery listers, fragments of reminders. Then she noticed something tucked inside the back cover, a folded receipt. Hannah opened it, her eyes widened. Sebastian. He crossed the room immediately. The receipt showed a wire transfer confirmation. The amount exceeded $400,000. More importantly, it connected 2 account numbers she recognized from the flash drive. Sebastian studied it silently. This is not enough to expose them, he said, but it helps. Hannah sat on the edge of the bed. Exhaustion finally caught up with her. The previous week replayed through her mind in scattered images. The mysterious notes, the storage unit, the flash drive, the gala Valerie. None of it felt real anymore. I keep thinking this should have stayed someone else's problem, she admitted quietly. Sebastian looked at her. You still believe that? Hannah laughed softly. No, the answer surprised even her. She rubbed her eyes. I think I stopped believing that somewhere around the storage unit, For several moments neither spoke. The silence felt different than it once had. Comfortable, honest. Sebastian finally sat across from her near the window. "There is something you need to know." Hannah straightened immediately. About Richard, about Tyler. The name alone tightened something inside her chest. Sebastian reached into his jacket and removed a thin file folder. He placed it on the table between them. These records came from an internal investigation conducted by one of Richard's former accountants. Hannah opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails, transaction approvals, and meeting schedules. At first, the documents looked familiar. Then she noticed the dates. Tyler's name appeared repeatedly. Not as a bystander, not as an employee following instructions, as an active participant. Hannah continued turning pages. Each document revealed another piece of the puzzle, another signature, another approval, another transfer. The truth settled heavily over the room. Tyler had known. Not recently, not accidentally, for years. "He helped them," she whispered. Sebastian nodded once. Hannah looked down at the documents again. The realization hurt more than she expected. Not because she loved Tyler anymore. That feeling had faded long ago. It hurt because she finally understood something she had spent months trying to ignore. The control, the secrecy, the constant pressure. None of it had been about protecting a relationship. Tyler had been protecting himself, protecting the foundation, protecting the secret hidden beneath all those charitable promises. "He was afraid of me," Hannah said quietly. Sebastian's expression remained steady. "Not of you." Hannah looked up. "Then what? What you might discover." The room fell silent again. Outside, a train horn echoed across the darkness. Somewhere far beyond the motel parking lot, dawn remained hours away. Hannah stared at the file. For the first time, the entire picture began fitting together. The flash drive had not appeared by accident. The messages had not been random. Someone had chosen her because she was already close enough to the truth to matter. Close enough to notice things. Close enough to become dangerous. Unfortunately for Richard Brooks, they now possessed more than suspicion. They possessed a trail leading directly toward the Foundation's leadership. Sebastian gathered the documents carefully. "We leave at sunrise." "Hannah, are we going?" Sebastian looked toward the dark highway stretching east toward Chicago, to find the final piece. At that exact moment, more than 200 miles away, an encrypted message arrived on a private phone inside Richard Brooks's penthouse office. The message contained only 6 words. They found Valerie's motel room. Sunrise painted the horizon in pale shades of gold and gray as the SUV rolled back toward Chicago. Hannah watched farmland and empty highways blur past the window while the documents from Valerie's motel room rested on her lap. Sleep had been impossible. Every new piece of evidence seemed to confirm the same truth. The Brooks Foundation was not simply hiding accounting mistakes. It had built an entire public image on promises that many vulnerable families never actually received. By mid-morning, the city skyline appeared ahead of them once again. Steel towers reflected sunlight across the river while traffic thickened around downtown exits. Sebastian drove in silence for most of the journey. Only after they entered the city did he finally speak. "The final piece arrived an hour ago." Hannah turned toward him immediately. "What final piece?" Sebastian handed her a secure tablet from the center console. A video file filled the screen. Hannah pressed play. The recording showed a private meeting room inside a corporate office. Several men sat around a conference table reviewing financial reports. One of them was Richard Brooks, another was Tyler. The footage contained no dramatic confession, no shocking outburst. It did not need one. The conversation alone was enough. They discussed moving funds between accounts, delaying audits, and disguising transfers as administrative expenses. Every name matched files from the flash drive. Every account number matched Valerie's records. Hannah felt her chest tighten. "This proves everything." Sebastian nodded once. "It proves enough." By noon, they arrived at a private office overlooking the Chicago River. Several attorneys and financial investigators were already waiting. For the next 3 hours, Hannah professionals organized evidence into timelines, transaction maps, and audit reports. The mystery that had consumed her life finally transformed into something tangible. Facts, dates, records, proof. Piece by piece, the entire structure collapsed under its own weight. Richard Brooks had spent years diverting charitable funds through shell companies. Tyler had helped authorize transactions and conceal discrepancies. The Foundation's public success masked a private network built on deception. What surprised Hannah most was not the scale of the scheme. It was how ordinary it looked on paper. No mastermind speeches, no dramatic secrets. Just thousands of decisions made by people who believed they would never be questioned. Late that afternoon, Sebastian walked onto the office terrace overlooking the river. Hannah joined him. Wind moved across the water below while boats drifted between bridges. For a long moment, neither spoke. "It is over, isn't it?" Hannah asked quietly. Sebastian rested his hands against the railing. "The mystery is." She looked toward the skyline. "Then why do I still feel nervous?" A faint smile touched his face. "Because ending something is sometimes harder than surviving it." Hannah considered that. He was right. The evidence existed. The truth existed. Yet she still needed to face the people responsible. As if summoned by the thought, her phone suddenly vibrated. Tyler's name appeared on the screen. Hannah stared at it. The ringing continued. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, she answered. "Hello." Silence greeted her first. Then Tyler spoke. His voice sounded different than she remembered. Tired, defeated. "I know you know." Hannah closed her eyes briefly. There was no point pretending anymore. Yes, another silence followed. "Can we talk?" he asked. Hannah looked across the terrace toward Sebastian. He remained several feet away, giving her space, giving her the choice. For perhaps the first time in a very long time, the choice truly belonged to her. "Why?" she asked. Tyler exhaled heavily. "Because there are things I should have told you a long time ago." The answer carried no excuses, no manipulation, only resignation. Hannah listened without speaking. Finally, Tyler gave her an address near the waterfront. "One conversation," he said quietly. "After that, I will never bother you again." The call ended. Wind swept across the terrace. Hannah lowered the phone slowly. Not because she owed Tyler anything, not because she wanted reconciliation, because closure required truth, and truth was finally within reach. Unfortunately for Tyler Brooks, he still did not realize that the evidence gathered over the last week was already moving toward federal investigators. By sunset, the carefully protected world built by the Brooks family would begin collapsing in public, and before the day ended, Hannah Cooper would hear the final confession that explained everything. The waterfront looked almost unreal beneath the fading colors of sunset. Orange light reflected across the surface of Lake Michigan, while long shadows stretched between rows of empty docks. Hannah parked near the address Tyler had given her and sat motionless for a moment before stepping outside. The air carried the scent of water and approaching rain. Several sailboats rocked gently against their moorings. The city skyline glowed in the distance like a wall of glass and gold. Tyler stood alone near the end of a wooden pier. No security, no expensive suit, no carefully managed image. For the first time since she had known him, he looked like a man carrying the weight of consequences he could no longer avoid. Hannah approached slowly. The boards beneath her feet creaked softly. Tyler turned when he heard her coming. Neither spoke immediately. The silence felt strange, not hostile, not emotional. "Thank you for coming," Tyler said at last. Hannah stopped several feet away. "You said there were things I needed to hear." Tyler nodded. His eyes drifted toward the water. "There are." Another silence followed. Then he exhaled heavily. "The foundation started out legitimate. Years ago, it actually helped people." Hannah listened without interrupting. "My father built a reputation that everyone trusted. Eventually, donations became larger. Opportunities became larger. Somewhere along the way, he convinced himself." He laughed bitterly. "Then he convinced me too." The confession sounded painfully ordinary. No grand speech, no dramatic excuse, just a series of choices. "You knew about the money," Hannah said quietly. Tyler lowered his head. Hearing the answer spoken aloud hurt less than she expected, perhaps because she had already accepted it. "Then why stay involved?" Tyler stared at the darkening horizon. "At first, because I was afraid of him. Later, because I was afraid of losing everything." Hannah studied him carefully. For the first time, she saw someone stripped of every mask. Not innocent, not misunderstood, simply responsible. "And me?" she asked. Tyler closed his eyes briefly. "You were never supposed to find anything." When the flash drive disappeared, everything changed. Hannah folded her arms. "You spent months trying to control every part of my life." Regret crossed his face, genuine regret. "I know." "Why?" Tyler looked directly at her. "Because I thought if I could control what you saw, where you went, who you talked to, then the truth would stay hidden." The words settled heavily between them. Hannah felt something unexpected, not anger. Clarity. For months she had searched for explanations. She finally had them. They were smaller and sadder than she imagined. Fear, greed, cowardice, nothing more. "The investigators already have everything," she said. Tyler nodded. "I figured that out this morning." For several seconds he did not answer. Wind moved across the lake behind him. Finally he spoke. "Because you deserve to hear me say I was wrong." Hannah blinked. Of all the things she expected, that was not one of them. Tyler continued before she could respond. Not about the money, not about the foundation, about you. His voice remained steady. I spent a long time treating you like a problem that needed managing instead of a person who deserved respect. Hannah looked away toward the water. The statement did not erase anything. It could not undo the past, yet hearing it mattered more than she wanted to admit. I am not looking for forgiveness, Tyler said quietly. Good, Hannah replied, because that is not why I came. Surprisey smiled, a small, sad smile. I know. Darkness gradually settled across the harbor. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes. No arguments, no dramatic confrontation, just truths finally spoken aloud. By the time Hannah turned to leave, something inside her felt lighter. The mystery was over, the fear was over, the uncertainty was over. She walked back toward the parking lot without looking behind her. Near the entrance, a familiar black SUV waited beneath a street lamp. Sebastian stood beside it. He had allowed her to make the journey alone, yet he had remained nearby the entire time. Hannah slowed as she approached him. How did it go? He asked. She looked back once toward the distant pier. Tyler remained standing beside the water, alone with the consequences of his choices. Then she turned forward again. It ended, she said. Sebastian opened the passenger door. Hannah was about to step inside when his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. For the first time that evening, genuine surprise crossed his face. What happened? Hannah asked. Sebastian looked up slowly. Richard Brooks was just taken into federal custody. 3 months later, Chicago looked different to Hannah Cooper. Not because the skyline had changed or the river flowed any differently between the towers. The city was the same. She was not. Morning sunlight poured through the windows of a small medical clinic on the north side where she now completed part of her nursing training. The waiting room buzzed with quiet conversations. Children laughed. Phones rang. Life moved forward. The headlines that once dominated every news channel had gradually faded. Federal investigators continued their work. Financial records had exposed years of deception inside the Brooks Foundation. Donations were being recovered. Community programs were being rebuilt under new leadership. Richard Brooks no longer stood behind podiums giving speeches about generosity. Tyler Brooks had accepted responsibility for his role and cooperated with authorities. The story that once seemed impossible had become public fact, yet none of that occupied Hannah's thoughts anymore. She had spent too much of her life reacting to other people's choices. For the first time, she was building something of her own. The clinic doors opened and another patient entered. Hannah greeted them with a smile, a real one this time, not the practiced version she once wore to survive difficult days. The shift ended shortly after noon. Outside, early spring sunlight warmed the sidewalks. Trees along the street had begun showing hints of green. Hannah stepped into the fresh air carrying a canvas bag over one shoulder. Across the street, a familiar black SUV waited beside the curb. Sebastian Romano leaned casually against the driver's door. Sunglasses in hand, the sight still made her smile. Not because he was powerful, not because of the stories people whispered about him, because somewhere along the way he had become the one person who never asked her to be smaller than she was. Hannah crossed the street. You are early, she said. You are late, Sebastian replied. By 2 minutes. I knew you counted. I count everything. The answer made her laugh. Together they walked toward a nearby cafe overlooking the river. Boats moved lazily across the water. Cyclists passed along the riverwalk. The city felt alive, normal, beautiful in a way Hannah had never fully noticed before. They found a table outside beneath a white umbrella. For a while they talked about ordinary things. School, work, the weather, future plans. The kind of conversation that once seemed impossible because survival left no room for imagining tomorrow. At one point, Sebastian slid a folder across the table. Hannah raised an eyebrow. What is this? Open it. Inside, she found legal documents, a grant proposal, funding agreements, plans for a community health outreach program. Her eyes widened as she turned pages. Sebastian, he shrugged lightly. The neighborhoods affected by the foundation scandal still need support. Hannah continued reading. The program focused scholarships and free clinics. Real help, transparent help. The kind of work the stolen donations should have funded years ago. You want me involved? She asked. I want you to lead it. Hannah looked up immediately. Lead it? You know what people need better than I do. The simplicity of the statement left her speechless. Months ago she would have doubted herself. Apologized, found reasons she was not qualified. Now she simply sat there considering the possibility. The future no longer felt like something happening to her. It felt like something she could choose. Hours later, they walked along the river as the sun slowly drifted westward. The city shimmered beneath clear blue skies. Eventually, they reached a quiet residential building several blocks away. Hannah unlocked the apartment door and stepped inside. The space was modest, comfortable, peaceful, a place that felt like home. She moved toward the bedroom and paused in front of a mirror mounted beside the closet. For a moment, she simply stood there. Sunlight streamed through the window behind her, filling the room with warm golden light. The reflection staring back looked familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Stronger, calmer, free. There was no makeup brush sitting on the counter, no careful effort to hide anything, no fear waiting behind her eyes. Sebastian appeared quietly in the doorway behind her. He did not interrupt the moment, he did not step closer, he simply stood there. Hannah met his reflection through the mirror, then she smiled, not at him, not even at the future, at herself. The woman staring back had survived everything that was meant to silence her. Outside, the city continued moving beneath the afternoon sun. Inside, for the first time in a very long time, there was nothing left to hide.